Yo, 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 welcome back to another episode of On the Spot Sports. And before we get to our guest today, we have a big shout out for Living Sisu. Living Sisu is a platform and app that wants to give you all the tools to have success in your sport. Their main objective is to activate your lifestyle. So it's for active people. Enjoy discounts at companies like BioSteel, 30% off, Body Logics, the Goalie Guild, all his books are discounted. Roan, Lululemon for men, 20% off. Online stretching programs with Eccentrics, 1 full month free. They got super silent massage guns, 20% off those. And it's a great quality. It's way less expensive than a Theragun, and it's great quality. So there's so many more discounts that you guys will need to just become a member to see. So they want to provide you with anything you need for success. So come join the community. I'm a part of it. A bunch of other athletes are a part of it. So it's free to join. It takes 20 seconds to get exclusive offers to your sport, and it's definitely worth it. So do us a huge favor and go sign up for Living Sisu's membership. It's free, takes 20 seconds. So go do it, and we'll see you there. Living Sisu is a great company. We know one of the co-founders, Zach Fricali. He's a great guy. He's the co-founder. He does a lot of live streams on Instagram at Living Sisu, with a bunch of elite athletes, and you learn a lot from like the athletes' determination, their resiliency, everything to what made them become successful. So it's been a great experience so far. So go on. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. So go sign up. Yo, welcome back to another episode of On the Spot Sports. I'm Jack, and in today's episode, we have a very special guest, former pro goalie and now a fellow podcaster, Braeden Ostepchuk. Braeden played in multiple junior hockey leagues before attending Norwich University playing NCAA Division III hockey. He then went on to play 2 full years of pro hockey at the ECHL and SPHL levels, playing for the Greenville Swamp Rabbits, Pensacola Ice Flyers, Cincinnati Cyclones, Indy Fuel, and the Evansville Thunderbolts. He now is working on a big project he has created with Learn to Perform, which is a podcast that provides everything he has learned from his time playing and so much more. Welcome to the show, Braeden Ostepchuk. Braeden, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for a great intro. That was really well done. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Got to give some good intros for some good guests. That's our goal here. Like, how have you been with like super weird times right now with COVID and all that? So what have you been doing to stay busy?
Yeah, you know what? My life basically flipped upside down. So back when the pandemic started in March, I was playing in Evansville in the SPHL, which was my final season of pro hockey. And I think I knew going into the season that I was planning on retiring, but I didn't expect it to happen so abruptly. It kind of happened just on kind of a flip of a switch. And so I wasn't sure what to do. I had a job lined up in the summer. So I was supposed to be going to Philadelphia and joining a startup company, which was super exciting. And then there was a lot of uncertainty, with the pandemic and the economy. And being a Canadian and getting immigration to go into the U.S., obviously the borders were closing down, and there was a lot of stuff happening on that front. So I ended up coming back home to Lethbridge, Alberta, which is where I've been. And at first I had a lot of time. I was like, okay, I just need to buy myself 2 or 3 months past the time, and then I'll be able to start working and move on in my career. And that didn't end up happening. But what I ended up doing is I started getting really bored, and I started just reading and kind of learning and watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts with all my free time. And I just started discovering and learning more and more things. I've always loved to learn about the human body and performance and sports and, business, you name it, everything under the sun. And I kept learning, and I just opened up my mind to so many different rabbit holes of information and topics. And I just kind of became an obsessive learner for 3, 4, 5 months. And that's what I've been doing. And really then as I got to the end of the summer, I kind of got the idea that with all this information I'd been learning and discovering, I kind of wanted to use a platform or create a platform to share it and help other people, because I'd been learning some pretty cool stuff, and I was sharing it with my friends and my family. And I always felt like my life was drastically improving in how I felt in terms of my health and my happiness. And I felt like I could see that in other people that were implementing new techniques that I was doing. And so that's kind of where Learn to Perform came in, as you introduced. And I'm sure we'll be able to talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, most of my time has just been, I like reading books. I like listening to podcasts. I like working out. I've been working in retail just for a couple months here to keep the times busy, but not too much, just hanging out and enjoying life, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like, what has been like some of the biggest things that you've learned throughout like everything you've learned throughout researching YouTube and all that?
Yeah, you know what? There has been so many, but there's probably a couple things that I think are the most impactful in my life, and not just from a science perspective, but from experiential. And I think the first one for me that really opened my mind was fasting. And I'd kind of heard about before and people implementing fasting. And I started really diving into the research. And at first I was like, okay, this is an easy way for me to burn some fat. You know, at first, to be honest, I was like, okay, let's get a 6-pack for the summer, right? Like who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
And then I started learning more and more about the science of how fasting works. And it's essentially in many ways like cellular cleansing. And it's, linked to decreased disease rates and decreased, cancer development and increased longevity. So you live longer, you feel better. And so I started trying with intermittent fasting, and I was experimenting, and I worked my way down to about a 4-hour eating window. So I was fasting for 20 hours a day. Then I went to a 1-hour window. So I was fasting essentially 23 hours every day. And then I was researching how the hormones and the endocrine response to extended fast. So what I did is I actually did a 120-hour water fast. And that was back in the end of April. So I did 5 full days without any food. And it was crazy. I mean, a couple days, it kind of sucked a little bit. It was difficult, but once you get through the hunger cravings, they kind of go away. And by day 4, day 5, I felt amazing. I remember going for a 2-mile run, 111 hours without any calories. And it changed my perspective on a lot of things in life. And I felt really good. So I have stuck with intermittent fasting since. I'm about 7 or 8 months in. And, that's definitely one of the things I like to share with people. Another thing that I've become really obsessed with is cold therapy. And so I know a lot of people are kind of getting into the whole world of cryotherapy, but even just daily cold showers. I started taking cold showers daily and working my way up from 10, 20 seconds to, 30 seconds to 2 to 3 minutes. And I found this huge energy rush. And I felt as though my daily energy lulls and brain fog all started to kind of dissipate. And I felt like I was way more productive. And then it just, everything started feeling better. So then I was fortunate we have a cryotherapy chamber in town, and I was able to go there and start doing that weekly. I've been doing it since, and I just feel drastically better with that. And then a lot of other things that I've learned about it just kind of come down to lifestyle. So everything from diet to exercise to getting sunlight and everything in between, and just kind of the science of genetics and epigenetics, which is basically kind of how the human body works in conjunction with your lifestyle, and just ways to make these little tweaks that compound into massive changes in how you feel and how you perform, which as a former athlete, this matters because if you're not at your peak health or your peak energy levels or your peak happiness, you can't expect that to translate into your sport. And so I know we're both hockey players and we're both goalies. And in my experience, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this, is that, if mentally you're not there 100% and you're in a game, even just those split seconds, if you lose a split second of that ability to react and to read a play, chances are you're probably going to get scored on. And I know I experienced that a lot in my life, where there were times where I would struggle to have myself in that peak state, not just in terms of, we talk about like mental focus, but just physically, like if I'm not quite there, that's the difference between winning or losing, moving up to the next level, getting demoted, or, in some cases when it gets really cutthroat, that's the difference between having or losing a career. So, I think there's just so many little tweaks that people can make to incrementally improve their performance and improve their life, obviously beyond their given sport. And those are a few of the things that, I hope to share and shed more light on for people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just going back to like the goaltending, how like your mindset has to be there for sure. Like I remember thinking about like life just a little bit, and the next thing I know, the puck's behind me, and then like I was still dwelling on a goal I gave up like the period before. Next thing I know, the puck's in the back of the net. So it's just about having a good mindset and just staying positive, because if you're not positive and if you keep dwell on those goals that you give up, it's going to hurt you in the long run. And you just got to separate life from the game and just have total focus on the game and not anything else. And then just positive self-talk too is a huge thing for me, is especially after giving up a goal, just being like just stop the next puck, just stay on your angles, just everything like that, and just stay positive. Don't bring yourself down. Like those are some important things that I've learned through mindset as a goaltender.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you anymore, because those are exactly the challenges you're describing is what I faced my whole career. And going back for most of my life, I definitely struggle a little bit with anxiety, and I have, I'd say relatively moderately severe OCD. I'm very anal about certain details. And so in my mind, I always get into this little internal feedback loop where I just have to like tell myself the same thing over and over. And one of the biggest struggles I had throughout my career is when I would give up a goal or something, I'd think about it, be like, you know what, I probably should have been able to read that and make that save. Or, there's probably a little bit of adjustment. And then the worst thing you can do is you sit there and you're 5 minutes later and you're still like, I can't believe that I didn't make that read. but the play is happening, and it's happening so fast. And I think that's one of the things you were talking about, is the whole idea, like, you have to be in that moment. And the way I like to think about it is, if you think about, the bandwidth of a computer, basically, so there's only so much information that can be processed over a connection at a given time, right? So it's the same
Yeah.
thing for mental bandwidth. So our cognitive capacity is limited. We can only process so much information at one given time. And so I like to think of it as, let's say you have a glass that's full. It's like you got 100% of a meter, right? That's your cognitive capacity. And if I'm stuck dwelling on, let's say, a goal that happened in the last period, that's going to take my meter down from 100% focus in that moment, and my cognitive capacity to, let's say, maybe 95 or 90. But then let's say all of a sudden you got homework on the side this year at school at the time, or maybe you got a job on the side, or, maybe you got something going on in your relationships, and then all of a sudden that meter bumps down to 80 to 70. So if your cognitive bandwidth isn't at full percent, like, that's going to harm you, because the difference, like we talked about, whether it's a little deflection or there's just little reads, or you got to see there's a guy coming, off the flank coming one side, those little reads, like, the puck moves so fast and the game happens so fast. So if you lose a split second, chances are that split second is like just a 1 or 2 inches, and that's all it takes. It's Murphy's Law. If there's a hole, the puck will find it. So if you are not 100% in that moment, you are drastically, like, even though it's just like a 1 or 2% lapse in focus, that's enough to be a difference between like a 900 save percentage and a 950 or like an 850, which, like, as we all know as goaltenders, is the difference between making it or losing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's 100%. You're spot on. You have to have those kind of trigger words and those little phrases that, okay, all that matters is the next puck. I kind of like to relate it back to the Stoic philosophy, and the whole idea is that everything in the past is irrelevant. It's gone. So it's irreversible. So just say, you know what, forget it. It's done. And then everything in the present, like, this is all that we have. Like, we'll never have tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, tomorrow's never going to come, because even when you get to tomorrow, like the next day on the calendar, let's say we're recording this today, December 3rd. So let's say we get to December 4th, there's still going to be a tomorrow that's never going to come. So you can't worry about, the third period if you're in the second period. You can't worry about the first period if you're in the second period. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. And I think that was definitely one of my greatest weaknesses. But I think you've got the right approaches. You just got to, next puck, what's the moment? And just try and stay grounded as much as you can. And it'll go a long way. And I think that translates to life too. It's not just about goalies, but, anything in life, trying to stay rooted in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, did you try any of these during, like, your career when you were playing last year? Like any of the performance things you've researched, or like fasting? Did you try that at all, or like what you do when you were playing?
Yeah. So unfortunately, most of these things I started discovering was just in this pandemic. So after I retired, so I didn't do any fasting, and I'd kind of heard about it a bit, but I think I was very nervous about the idea of trying to perform or trying to go into, an hour, 2 hour long practice without having eaten. And I think it's just kind of the classic mindset that if you don't have food, like, what's going to happen? And obviously it's a lot more complicated than that with the human body. And there are ways to be, metabolically adapted to being in a fat state, or, not having necessarily a carbohydrate reserve and being able to still perform. But I didn't really tinker with that. As for cold therapy, I mean, I did do a lot of ice baths, but it was mostly, maybe let's say 3 times a week. And it's usually after practice, which, upon further research, I think I probably wouldn't, going back, I don't think I'd ever do ice baths again after practice. I think I would do them independent, just for the separate benefits, but not so much for the healing of the muscle benefits. Cryotherapy, I wasn't able to really do. The other big things that come in, which are kind of just the low hanging fruit. You talk about getting quality sleep and quality nutrition. And I know you've had people talk about that as well before. And so I think I did a pretty good job of trying to eat whole foods and eat a diverse, quality. And so get good nutrition base and try and prioritize sleep. And I don't know if you're familiar with Whoop fitness trackers, but I've had a Whoop fitness tracker. I had it for the last couple of years. And so it tracked my sleep and my strain and my heart rate variability and my resting heart rate. So I could kind of gauge, how my body was doing and what I needed to adapt. But looking back, I wish I had known some of this earlier. And I think that it could have made those little incremental changes that could have helped my career. But as I was playing, most of this was just kind of, what's the status quo? What's everyone else doing? And, you try and be as healthy as you can. You try and exercise as much as you can, sleep as well as you can, but nothing too special or glamorous.
Yeah, exactly. And just, I never realized how big, like, nutrition is as an athlete. It's just, like, last year, like, I wouldn't say I was the best at eating, like, the healthiest food, especially at school, because you could only eat so much at the cafeteria at school.
Right.
But like this year, like, my nutrition has been a lot better, and I'm eating, like, chicken, pasta, like, before games and everything, and just, like, a lot of carbs, a lot of protein. So, like, it definitely has taken my performance to the next level. So I was surprised by that, but like I shouldn't be surprised. Like it should be expected. Like you should be eating super healthy anyways, but it definitely did change my mindset to like eating more healthy and like especially with sleep. Like if you get like I try to get 8 hours of sleep a night, and like your performance definitely does drastically improve when you have both of those.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And actually, sleep and nutrition are two of the things that I've really researched a lot, and some of the things that I want to start talking about with the Learn to Perform platform. And if you don't mind, I can add a little bit about sleep. Like one of the things I was reading this great book. It's called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. I think he's a professor of neuroscience, maybe psychology. I think he's at University of California, Berkeley. Don't quote me on that. But in his book, he wrote about a ton of great stuff about sleep. And one of the biggest eye openers for me was the impact of sleep deprivation. And so basically there's multiple studies that have shown that, if you go, let's say even 19 hours without sleep, which for some people, if they're only sleeping 5 hours a night is almost baseline. And they're showing that if you go 19 hours without any sleep, you have the equivalent cognitive lapses as someone who's legally drunk with a full 8 hours of sleep. And so they've done like tests of people driving and showing that just like, even one night of sleep deprivation can basically be the same cognitively as you having like these lapses in performance. I know we go back to thinking about high performance sports, and you think about goaltending. We talk about like those split seconds. That one night where you don't quite get that full sleep and you're just a little bit tired. I mean, yeah, you can jack yourself up on caffeine and C4, but at the end of the day, like that's still those little bits that you're missing, those pieces that can drastically influence how you're performing. And it's just kind of crazy to think about. And I know in college, I struggled a bit to maintain proper sleep. And I think that's just part of, you're busy, right? As a student athlete, you got a lot of stuff going on. And so it's hard for a lot of people. But when I went to pro, that was the biggest change I made. Is I kind of made sleep a non-negotiable priority. It's like, no, I got to get to bed. I need to get my sleep. And if I need to nap, I'm going to nap. And I mean, I would have naps every game day, unless it was the rare afternoon game or something. But, I found that was hugely important to me. And then when we talk about food, it's amazing because not only does food obviously is the fuel for your body, right? And so to be able to perform and feel energized, but it's also the fuel for your mind. And this is something that I didn't really appreciate enough. And it's amazing. So basically one of the biggest things that I've learned is in your gut, your gut houses almost everything in your body. So the food goes in and the food preserves your gut, and you have like billions of different bacteria and stuff. And they're basically how like life on earth exists, is the bacteria in our gut. And I mean, it's even suggested that I think up to 75% of your immune system lives in your gut. So basically if you feed it good food, it'll respond to that. If you feed it bad food, it's not going to be able to do what it needs to do. And through the vagus nerve, there's actually what they call, the classic gut brain connection. You have that gut feeling. Well, so the nervous system, a lot of the nervous system and what they actually call is our second brain lives in the gut. And so it's directly influenced by the foods you eat. So if you're eating, crappy foods and a lot of processed foods and just sugars all the time, you're not feeding the bacteria that works, and that directly affects your brain. And I think one of the biggest things I noticed this summer is when I wanted to get rid of brain fog and just kind of those feelings of being tired and being fatigued. So food was the number one source. Is if I eliminated the processed foods and, refined sugars, and I was able to focus on just whole food. So like you said, I mean, there's a lot of fruits, there's a lot of vegetables. And if it's going to be meats, it's just whole meats. It's not gone through a deep fryer a couple times, like on a fast food takeout. And, that stuff makes a huge difference, physically and how you feel, but also mentally. So I think you nailed it right there. It's amazing as you keep making these little tweaks and these little improvements. And when you then start to watch like the really elite athletes, you look at the people like the LeBron James or the Sidney Crosbys, you name it, from any sport, and you see how refined they are in these little aspects, these little details of their life. And you start to realize that adds up to being a huge difference maker if you really want to be elite.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to like being elite and all that, like you definitely the little details are what makes or breaks someone's like how they play. It's like I've noticed as a goaltender and as an athlete is like all the like you can be as talented as you want as you can, like as talented as you are, but if you don't put in the work, like you're not going to get you're not going to get far. And like the little details are definitely the probably one of the most important things is just to work on is just the little details, like goaltending, like just the movements, like skating, like those are little parts of the game, but that you do. And once you keep practicing them, like it's a game changer. And it's definitely, I never thought of it like that until like recently. And like since I've done these little details, like my performance has gone through the roof. And it's just, you wouldn't expect it, like
Right.
but like it does definitely does help.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy because you think at first, and I remember even being skeptical when I started studying a lot of these things. You're like, come on, like, is changing just like a little tweak to my meal? Like, is it really going to make a difference? Like, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to me whether or not I stop the puck. But it's, it is more than that. It does add up. And the other thing you got to think about too is if, let's say, you really want to be competitive and you really want to take your game to the elite level and to perform in the highest leagues and against the best players, like the difference between the very best in the world and like the ones who are just below them, like it's very, very small. Like, so let's just, if we say like we took the NHL, for example, because it's, or, NFL, NBA, MLB, whatever you want to talk about, you talk about the best league in the world for a certain sport. And let's say, there's 1,000 athletes in that league. Like the difference between the number one player, with the exception of maybe like the odd time you have like the top 3 or 5 that are just like absolutely like just incredible. But if you, let's say you take like number 5 all the way down to like number 1,000, there's probably very, very little difference between them. And so, like, in order to succeed in the difference between winning or losing or keeping your job or moving up a league or getting sent down a league, et cetera, or, if you're in college and you're trying to beat out a competition to get onto a college team or get recruited or to actually be in the lineup and actually get to play, like, everyone has a fundamental skill level that's all pretty close. Once you get to that level, like when you're at the college level, for example, where you are, like, everyone that you will play with and against is relatively close, right? So it's only going to be those little differences is all it takes to get yourself just to the top of the pile, or if you lack certain little details to get to the bottom of the pile. And I saw a great quote. I think it was a couple years ago. I think it was the Nashville Predators goalie coach, and he was doing a little video. He was talking about Pekka Rinne and Jussi Saros. And he was talking about the details, some of the details they work on in practice. And basically, one of the things he said was the difference between the best goalie in the NHL and the worst goalie is 0.1% or 1%, because they're all so good, right? Because they're all so close. So what is the difference? He's like, we are trying to find that 1% or that 0.1% detail that bumps us up. And that's going to be the difference between winning, losing, having a career, not having a career. Like, I mean, like that 0.1% could be the difference between Pekka Rinne and a goalie who made it to the NHL, but maybe only played 1 or 2 games and never made it back. And, when I kind of look back on my career, I think I did some of these things well. But, I made it where I only played 1 game in the ECHL and I played most of my pro career in the SPHL. And I think, it's so competitive and there's so many goalies, but looking back, were there these little 1% changes I could have made that probably could have gotten me just that little bit better so I could perform just a little bit better, get maybe one more opportunity, and maybe I had a full ECHL career instead of just 1 game and a couple call-ups. Like, it's looking back, obviously it's impossible to know, and I don't have any regrets. I'm proud of my career, but I definitely think that there was that space left on the table where I didn't fully maximize my potential, and so I think that's a challenge for goalies coming up, and hopefully goalies and athletes and people coming up can get this information so they can start optimizing it as soon as possible to become their best version. And so you can truly fulfill your potential, because there's nothing kind of worse than sitting thinking, shoulda, coulda, woulda, that's no one wants to be in that position.
Yeah, exactly. And just like every day, like try to get 1% better every day. Cause that's what I've been trying to do, is just be better than I was the day before. And just, it motivates you for sure, because you want to be better than yourself before or yesterday. So just do that. And like going back to like the pregame nap, like you're obviously for pregame naps, but like I know a lot of people are against them. It's like how often would you, or like how long would your naps be, and like what benefits have you seen from taking pregame naps?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I think that is probably subjective. So everyone has their own, thing, what works for them. So I'm not 100% sure on the science, but, for me, I just felt that I needed to do that to not just fill the time, but I also felt it was a way for me to kind of flush out the brain. You get up, you go through your morning, you go to the rink, you have a pregame skate, you have your pregame meal. Like when you can kind of just go into bed and you can kind of just retreat into sleep, it's basically a way, like I felt like it was just like a reset on the day. And so typically, let's say if it was a 7:00 game day, on average, maybe leave between 4:30, sometimes get there just a little over 2 hours before the game. So I'd probably nap ideally from like 1 to 3. I may not be asleep the whole times, but, I would usually often be a pretty big napper. Like I'd be talking like 1 to 2 hours. It wouldn't be like a 20-minute cat nap kind of thing. Like I'd lay down, I'd hunker down, and I'd get in there. And I also did like to do ice baths before naps. I found that I slept way better and had way better naps after I'd done an ice bath in the morning. So I like doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was something that where it was part of my routine. I like the structure. I like that it gave me just a space by myself, and I could take my time waking up, and I had it kind of like built in, like I'd wake up from my nap, I'd have an hour where I can just kind of listen to music, do a little stretching, kind of get myself going. I didn't like eating right before games. So if it was a 7 o'clock game, like I'd have my meal at 12:30 and by 1 o'clock, and then like that would be it until the game. So I'd go in 5-6 hours just because I felt better playing on a lighter stomach. I know some people like having more of the food, but I felt like I just wanted to have it at least 5-6 hours so I could kind of feel light. And, I felt like I didn't have any energy issues throughout the game. And then the other thing with sleep is a lot of it would just depend on the night before. So if I had gotten really good sleep, then maybe I didn't need to nap quite as long. If I didn't get as good of a sleep, and maybe that comes down to the question of, is it a Saturday game and we played last night? And so if we played last night, how late were we up? Chances are if you got a game until it ends, let's say 9:30, 10 o'clock, you don't get home till 10:30, 11, you're still buzzing. Like it's really hard to fall asleep right after game. Like I'm sure, like chances are, even if you're super tired, like physically you're exhausted, mentally you're just not ready until like 1 a.m. You got to go to the rink. Let's say if it's an 8 a.m. meeting or 8 a.m. morning skate, you're only getting 6 hours of sleep. So a lot of times the routine just kind of worked out where I felt to meet my quota for the sleep that I needed to feel prepared and feel rested, that nap was what I wanted to do. And I know some guys live and die by, yes, I have to nap. And some guys live and die by, no, I will not nap at all for the life of me. And I think that's just a personal choice. But for me, it just kind of worked with my routine and what I felt the best doing.
Yeah, especially for me, like I usually do like an hour to 2 hours, just like a few hours, like probably like 5-6 hours before a game, just
right,
take a nap. It just it refreshes you, and like you come in with a new energy after that nap, and it's a good feeling. And then along with like buzzing after the game, like your mind's going like all over the place after games, and it's like you're thinking about like all the goals that you gave up, the saves that you made, like everything's going around in your head. Like it's super hard to fall asleep after games, that's for sure.
Yeah. And like you said, there's a million things too, because then all of a sudden you get people texting, like let's say you got your family members texting you, you're talking to your teammates or you're thinking about what that coach said and you're like, I don't know what he's talking about or something like that. And it's just endless. But then at the same time, you're still, okay, that game's done. You're still kind of reeling about that. But now you're like, okay, tomorrow, like who's next? What's up? Like, what's my opportunity? What I got to do? So it is really hard to kind of find that silence and that peace at night. And I think that's, in my experience with all the different teammates I've had and guys I've played with, I mean, even whether you're on the road and you're at the hotel room or you're at home and you're at the apartments or you're at school, like everyone's buzzing, until, probably 1-2 o'clock. I mean, it'd be pretty hard pressed to find a guy who just played, a high level and intense game and be able to just fall asleep. Like you'd have to be pretty tired. So that's another reason why I think the nap is a really good alternative to mix in there, especially if it's the second day in a row with a game.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go into your junior career a little bit here. So you play in you played in 3 different leagues. You played in the KIJHL, the BCHL, and the MJHL. And like during your time in the BCHL for the Powell River Kings, you went 2-12. So that must have been a rough year for you. So like, what did you do to help help your mindset, like especially like when you lose games and like just overall, like what would you do to help yourself stay like in the moment, especially when everything's going wrong?
Yeah, that was definitely a tough year, but that was an incredible learning experience. And I'm super grateful for all the coaches, everyone there. Kent Lewis was the coach in Powell River, and my long-term goalie coach and mentor, Jeff Batta, he was our goalie coach. And I think he was a big reason why I was able to get out in Powell River. Because, to be honest, looking back, if I take this back a few steps early, so my last 5 years of minor hockey, so when I was 13 years old to 17 years old, I got cut from every rep team in Lethbridge here. So every AAA and AA team. So I was playing house league hockey up until I was 17. And I kind of felt like my development really stunted. I worked really hard in the summers, and technically, in terms of skating, in terms of movement, in terms of understanding the position, I felt like I was pretty good. I felt like I could have played at a high level, but just the speed and just the experience, the number of reps I had facing high quality shots and just being able to read a play that happens fast. And as you obviously get to higher levels, guys are more skilled. They make quicker plays, faster plays, and everything's from reading where the shot's going to go or kind of, how guys are moving or how guys are passing or how the play's developing. I felt like I was really kind of lagging behind. So I was lucky. My 18-year-old year, I walked on to Kimberly Dynamiters, which was junior B team in the KIJHL, and had a great year. Then I loved it. And I did really well, and I was lucky where it was good enough to get the opportunity to move up to the BCHL, which, from 2 years from being a house league hockey player to playing the BCHL against NHL draft picks and a lot of D1 recruits was a huge jump. And I was super excited to do it. And my goal was always set on, I got to play D1 hockey. I want to play pro. Like I have to be in the BCHL or the AJHL or whatever, but same thing. And it was awesome. And I was super grateful to be there, but I definitely even when I was there, I kind of knew that I didn't think I quite belonged. I thought like I was just chasing the puck all the time, or I was chasing the play. There was a lot of aspects of my game where I felt like, yes, I'm going to have to be in the BCHL, but just the reading and reacting to the game, I think I really struggled. And it probably shows up because I think my save percentage is like 882 or something. So, I mean, it gets worse than that, but obviously that wasn't good. And I had 2 wins. At the start of the year, I felt like I was in a lot of close games, or just we couldn't quite pull it off, or just, maybe we weren't scoring a lot. And then as the season got on and it just got harder and harder, like it really kind of went downhill, and it was really tough. So a lot of that, I was fortunate to have my goalie coach there, Jeff Bada. And one of the biggest things he always preached to me was process, process, process. And so the whole idea is, listen, it's not going to happen overnight. Things aren't going to get better overnight. You just have to focus on the process. And so what is the process today? What are we focused on in this practice or in this morning skate that's going to help you get better, that we can improve? What is your greatest weakness right now that we can address and we can try and practice on? So it goes back to exactly what you were talking about, the whole idea of 1% better every day. And that was basically it. It was just kind of the idea of, just stay the ground. You've been through a lot before. I've been cut from a lot of teams. I've been playing different levels. I've struggled and had different adversities. It's, this was all part of my journey. And I think the other kind of mindset, I was like, you know what? Realistically, I am very lucky to be in the BCHL right now because it is such a good league. And like, don't waste a day, because for all you know, like this day may end. There's no extended date. Like any day it could be like, listen, we got to bring another goalie. Like you could get cut, you could get traded, you could go somewhere else. So it was like, I'm grateful I'm here. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm just going to do everything I can to get a little bit better. And that was basically the mindset. It was nothing special. It ended up being a pretty long year, and I knew by the end of it, because I was a 19-year-old, and I think the BCHL at the time, I don't know if it's changed, was only 4 20-year-olds max. So, your overage limit. And so I knew they weren't going to keep me around. They said, we already got the 20-year-old spots filled, so we're going to try and move you around. And so it's just, I was, fortunate though for everything they did to me and did for me. And I developed and learned a ton just being on the ice with some of those guys every day. I think we had probably 10 or 11 D1 commits, and to a lot of top schools that I got to play with. So it was a great year and a frustratingly disappointing year at the same time. But yeah, no, honestly, the mindset was the exact same. Like you talked about, 1% better, show up every day and do everything you can to stay and just, compete like your life is on the line. And that was basically it.
Yeah, I get that for sure. And like going back to like the learning curves that you've had throughout that years, would you say like learning about the process and like learning to like focus on a couple things during practice to help yourself get better, was that some of the things that you've learned throughout that year?
Yeah, that's 100%. Those are the most important things, I think, is you have to just be completely in the process. And as we talk about, not just through that year, learning to try and stay level headed, but if I even take it fast forward to, let's say, my first year of pro hockey as well, I was fortunate to I was actually in a very similar position. I think I finished the year with 4 wins and 20 losses that first year in Evansville. I think we almost set the league record for the worst season ever in SPHL history. But we had a lot of struggles, but I was fortunate that our coach, Ian Moran, who I absolutely love and adore, he played, I think for 10, 12, 14 years or something in NHL, mostly with Pittsburgh. And he taught me so much about what it means to be a pro. And these were lessons I'd kind of started learning. And I definitely learned a lot from, going back to Jeff Bada. But the biggest thing I think I took away from my first year of pro hockey is that being a hockey player, and especially being a goaltender, it is a roller coaster. Because you're going to have good nights, you're going to have bad nights, you're going to have some nights in between, right? Like sometimes you're going to be going upside down on a 360 loop, and sometimes you're going to be just like slowly crawling to the top, and then everything's going to drop. And he said the biggest thing you can do is you got to realize like the seasons are 50, 60, 70 games. Like, and if you're going to have a career could be 10, 15 years. And, so let's say we break it down. You got 10, 15 years of 50, 60 games. Each game is going to have 3 periods. Each period could have like, let's say from a goalie's perspective, 10, 15 shots, but could be like 20, 30, 40 chances. Like you break it down to everything. It's like that one goal that happened or that one loss, like it's so minor in the big picture. But if you fixate on it, it's going to just throw you around, and you're going to be riding the roller coaster your whole life, and you're going to be having ups and downs, and you're going to just lose control. He said the biggest thing you can do, get off the roller coaster. Just get off the roller coaster. You know what? Doesn't matter. It's done. And just try and stay every day, approach it the exact same way. So whether you just gave up 8 goals the night before, or you had like a 50 save shutout, it doesn't matter. You're the same person. Don't let your ego go down. Don't let your ego go up. Just stay flat. Get off the roller coaster and just walk on flat ground and just show up the same way every day. And I think that was the biggest thing I learned. And So I've definitely had 2 seasons where it was like that, where I was losing a lot and basically not winning, and you just kind of feel like you don't belong. You feel like it's hopeless almost. So those are definitely some lessons I learned in those experiences, and I'm truly grateful to have had years like that.
Yeah, for sure. And just going into like being level headed and like you got and like confidence as well. Like as a goaltender, you have to have self confidence in yourself. So like how important was that self confidence in yourself and learning throughout what your coaches were saying and like the belief that you belonged at that level? Because if you don't believe you belong at that level, like it's obviously going to take a toll on your game.
Yeah, you can't perform if you don't have that self belief, right? Like that's got to be the foundation. That's got to come first, even before the belief from other people. I think a lot of it just, confidence comes from competence, and competence comes from practice and from doing the work. So really, to get to that point where you're like, you know what, I can make these saves. And almost even just replaying from a mindset approach. You're in practice every day, and sometimes, yeah, you give up goals on certain situations, or you feel like you're kind of outbeat. But then you think back, and you're like, you know what, I've made this save in this situation on this player before. And then even just kind of the idea is like when I would think back to Powell River, and I would struggle a lot, and even in Evansville, I'd struggle a lot. And I was thinking, okay, you know what, like I'm struggling here, but on our team, we have 10 D1 commits. Let's say back when I was in Powell River, I was really struggling, not a good save percentage, only 2 wins all year. And I'm thinking, okay, we have some really good players. We got guys going to Boston College. We got guys going to, I don't know, you name it, right? All these great D1 schools. We got guys on draft pick lists. And I'm thinking, every day I face these players in practice, and every day I stop these players. Yeah, they score on me sometimes. Yeah, I get beat. But in different situations, whether it's breakaways, 2-on-1s, turnovers, plays in the slots, all these different things, like I am making these saves every day on these same situations. So like I know that I have the ability. And just at some point, there was almost a disconnect, between whether or not I could translate that from the practice to the game. I think a lot of times in practice, there's less pressure, because you're on the team. You're like, yeah, obviously you don't want to get scored on a lot because that sucks. And you don't want the coach to see you getting scored on a lot because you're like, well, no, I'm never going to play. But, there's less pressure than all of a sudden it's in the game, and where you could cost everything for your team, right? Or even just the fans, like you're at home, you got people coming out and paying money to support you, and you're letting them down, for that hometown team. But you got to just kind of realize that you're making those saves all the time. So you definitely have the ability. It's definitely there. And it's a matter of practice and practice and practice, right? And you build it up and you repeat it over and over and over. And then as you start to do that more and more often, and you get more and more competent, I think that's where the confidence comes from. But it definitely almost starts with a mindset shift is what I was trying to say there. Where you realize, I have done this before. I can do this, and I know how to do this. And now it's just a matter of doing it over and over again until it becomes more and more consistent. And it's the process, right? Like you can't go from 0 to 100 in one day. You can't go from the BCHL to the NHL in one day. You just have to find each day, how can I get a little bit better? How can I do that 1%? Even if it's just 0.1%, what can I work on today in practice? What's the one focal point in today's game that I can do to be a little bit better? And it's the long game. You just got to be patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just all comes in full circle with like learning, being a student of the game and just learning every day of what you're doing. Just like NHL guys are still learning and being a student of the game every single time they're on the ice. So like there's always opportunities for you to be a student and just keep learning, especially if it's a game or something you love, you're passionate for. Like it's very easy to be a student of the game and just focus on what take bits and pieces from other people that are telling you stuff and just putting it in your game. And it definitely does help. It helps you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best things you can do, I think, is to constantly seek knowledge from other people, because everyone experiences the game just a little bit differently, or they had just a little bit different coaches or different personal experiences or played in different environments. And I think it's kind of narrow-minded to assume that you have enough knowledge, because like you said, even the pros, like they're going to be out there every day asking someone like, what could I do to tweak this? And I think one of the best things that has happened in my career is being exposed to so many different minds in goaltending. And, I talked about Jeff Bada earlier, who was a huge influence. When I was at college, we had our goalie coach, Cap Radar, when I was at Norwich University, who was phenomenal. And he, I think he played back in the day. I don't want to screw this up. I think he played at Dartmouth, and then he was drafted to Montreal, I think, behind Ken Dryden when Ken Dryden was there. Maybe I'm mixing this up. But then he was a goalie coach for a long time for San Jose, working with Nabokov and Vesa Toskala, and he was goalie coach a little bit in Tampa Bay. So, he's been with some phenomenal athletes and some phenomenal goaltenders. And just his perspective on the game was so much different than anything I'd encountered. I was so used to just being like, okay, how do I optimize my size and my positioning and just take up the net? And it was more about blocking pucks. And I remember spending so much of my life, whether it be goalie camps or practices, or you bring in goalie coaches, it's always, okay, we got to work on the T pushes, the shuffles. How are you going to anchor into your post? How are you going to integrate with your post, push off the post? How are you going to, rotate and push and maximize your efficiency, mechanically? So it's basically all biomechanics of being a goaltender. And I remember with him for 4 years at Norwich, I don't think we did any of that. And when I started working with him, like, Cap, like, why are we doing just shuffles and eye stuff? Like, it's like, what are you doing? But I realized, because his approach to the game was so much different, and he taught me a lot about trying to read the game and understand the game and think about the game like as a system and holistically. So how do plays develop? Like, what is a player trying to do? If he's coming down a certain wing, what are his options? Like, are other threats, maybe they're down low. What are his options here? Are you left-handed or right-handed? What are the different angles? What are they seeing? And it's just a whole different approach to reading the game and anticipating the game and learning to actually play the game rather than play the position, and try and incorporate the whole thing. And I think that was a huge eye-opener to me. Another great resource I had was Jared Wyman, who's out in Connecticut. I worked with him the last couple of summers. He runs Pro Crease goaltending, and I think he just got hired to be a goaltending scout for, I want to say Tampa Bay. I'm not sure, but he's been longtime goalie coach with Quinnipiac, and obviously they've been one of the best D1 hockey programs for a number of years now. And his attention to detail and their whole staff out there, and just the little ways that they break down situations and plays. Every time I met a new goalie coach or a new goalie or worked with a new guy, and all the different pro goalies I've worked with, everyone has had some little perspective on a certain situation or on goaltending as a whole that has just kind of opened my mind. And I think the best way that you can really develop your game is to seek out knowledge from as many people as possible. And I think it's the same way, like, if you want to be a good student, or if you want to just understand life, or you want to understand business, one of the best ways is just to read a lot of books. So go into your genre and your niche and just find different books, because different authors have different experiences and different perspectives, right? And so I guess I would add to this, if one of the really best ways, if you really want to learn, is find a resource that has access to a lot of different voices and information, which is exactly what you're doing, right? Because you're talking to so many different goalies and people that have been in the sport. And so even, for your listeners that listen along to your podcast, you're getting so many different tidbits from all these different perspectives. And then I think you find ways, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and you incorporate that into your life, into your game and your performance. And I think that's kind of the ways you just want to take advantage of all the learning that other people have done and save yourself a lot of time, and just slowly adapt and trickle in until you build kind of your own personalized program or style. So yeah, that's kind of a little perspective on some of the learning I've done, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of great people to learn from.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Just how much you've learned over your career, and it's definitely helped you in the long run for your game, and like in person and in life as well. Like, you translate a lot of that stuff in what you do in everyday life, not just your sport, and it makes you a better person overall. So it's always a good sign when you're a good student, you're a good athlete, and you're a good person, have a good life. So that's all that really matters here.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is the same, right? I mean, sport is just a microcosm for life, and just like everything else, like career, education, it all ties in. And it's amazing how many lessons I've found through hockey that have transferred into working career, into education, working with teams, working with people, leadership, it all translates across the board. And so I think one of the best things we can do as humans, not just as goalies or as athletes, but as humans, is just to learn and seek out knowledge. And you'd be amazed how that can translate into different areas of your life and help you be happier and healthier and perform better.
Yeah, exactly. So going into Norwich University now, you put up some really good numbers when you played for Norwich, and you were also a captain, I believe, your senior year, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So, like, what was your experience with college hockey and having that leadership role as a goaltender?
Go back to college. I loved it. I would do anything to go back. It was awesome. And I was super grateful to be able to play at Norwich, and it's an incredible program. And, I did have some really good numbers there, but I was blessed to play for an incredible team. And every year we had incredible guys, and they made my job super easy. So that was a ton of fun. And, being the leadership was different because, in many ways I've kind of considered myself to be a leader by example, and just, the way you can conduct yourself and the way you can perform. And even if a goaltender doesn't have a leadership title per se, every team knows that a goaltender can make or break your team every night. And so even when you go back to junior hockey, pro hockey, it doesn't matter. Like, you look at certain teams, the goaltender is often kind of a make or break guy. And so whether or not they're seen as, the leader leading the troops, especially because it is kind of a little bit of an isolated position in the team. So it's a little bit harder to translate the goalie's experience to the other players. But I think everyone knows that, that's an important part of our team. Like you look at a guy like Henrik Lundqvist, for example, throughout his whole career, would anyone ever say that he wasn't one of the leaders of that team? No, right? Like everyone knows that Henrik Lundqvist has been for a long time one of the top leaders of the New York Rangers. But is he going to wear the C? No. And there was the whole Luongo test run with the C for a year or two there, right? Or you even look at like Martin Brodeur when he was with the Devils. I mean, you could go through the whole list, right? So I think there is always kind of an unwritten component of being a leader, especially if you are a guy that is playing a lot and is an important part of the team. But actually having the formality of the C was a little bit different, and just it kind of changed a little bit because I didn't want to change too much about how I conducted myself. I wanted to stay true to who I am and how I conduct myself. But I felt there were certain situations where I was obligated to step up and take more of an active role in leadership and in, talking with teammates. And especially a lot of that comes down to engaging with freshmen, right? So when you're a senior and transitioning from junior to college is a big difference, and the culture and the expectations and what you need to do to be successful, but also what you need to do for Norwich specifically, right? Like every school has, this is our culture, this is our organization, this is how we do things here, right? And so there was definitely a little bit more of a role, but I thought it was a fairly easy transition. I was lucky to have a really good leadership team, with the other seniors we had and the other captains we had that, helped a lot. So I don't think it changed a whole lot. It was just kind of a little bit more of a formality, and there's a few extra obligations, but for the most part, I tried to stay as true as possible to how I've been in the previous 3 years, and for the reasons that I was nominated to be a captain.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we talk about the podcast that you've created, I want to talk on what was the process of signing your first pro deal? Right after your senior year, you played in the Coast and the SP. So what was the process of getting that opportunity?
Yeah, so that was a little bit wild. So my senior year ended right before our spring break. I think it was the first week of March. We lost out in our conference finals, and I was obviously Norwich University's out in Vermont, and I was spending the spring break out in Connecticut. And at first, I had kind of been looking into teams and talking to my goalie coach. My coach is saying what opportunities are there, and I wasn't really hearing much back, and I wasn't really sure. But I knew that I had a pretty good college career, and you'd often see some D3 goalies get a chance for amateur trials to go up. And so I figured I'd try and put myself out there. So then when I was on spring break, I was in Connecticut and I just had the week off. So I didn't have school, and, our season was over. And so I just started sending out emails. I just went onto all the ECHL and SPHL websites. I found every email, every coach I could find. I just wrote a little personalized email or phone numbers if I could find them. A lot of times the coaches, they don't put out their contact information, so it's a little harder to get them. And I contacted as many as I could. And I just said, here's the deal. I just graduated. I'm done. I want to transition to pro hockey. Here's, my pedigree and my stats from playing at Norwich. I would love to sign an amateur tryout, because the good thing about coming straight out of college is you have that amateur eligibility, so they can sign you to a tryout. It doesn't affect their roster size. So it's up to 2 weeks on the ATO. And so instead of them worrying about, okay, well, if we're going to sign this guy to a contract, then that means not only do we have to, pay him for the full amount, but we also have to release someone because we have to stay within our roster limits. And I just sent out a bunch of emails, and one of them happened to be Greenville. And then I also heard back from a couple of SPHL teams. I know the plan initially was to go to Macon in the SPHL, but I heard from Greenville, and they said, oh, we just had a couple of goalies go down with injuries. Would you be interested in signing an ATO? Can you come down here in 2 days? So I think it was a Wednesday morning, and they're like, can you be here for Friday? We play Friday in Norfolk. And that was basically all that happened. I got a call about 30 minutes later after I sent the email from the head coach, Brian Gratz, who I super appreciate because that was my only ever ECHL game. And, he gave me that first taste of pro hockey. And that's the reason I chose to continue playing for 2 years, because it was just one of the greatest moments of my life was being able to play pro. So I got the call. I was down in Connecticut. I had to go up to the border to get a new visa. So you have to get a P1 visa to be a hockey player and to play there. So what I had to do is I was in Connecticut. I had to drive 5 hours up to the border by Montreal after I got that call on Wednesday. Yeah, that was Thursday, I think. And then I drove all the way back. So it was like a 10, 11-hour day of driving so that I could get my new visa. They had me flights booked the next day out of Hartford. I flew down to Norfolk. They were in Norfolk for the weekend playing Friday and Saturday night. So I got in Friday afternoon, missed the morning skate. And then I dressed that night as the backup goalie Friday night in Norfolk. So it was just everything was just a rush. I hadn't been on the ice for 2 weeks. And then I dress up for warm-ups. You get 3, maybe 2 minutes of action in warm-ups of shots. You get 10 shots. And it's just night and day going from, Division III is great hockey, but the ECHL is incredible. And I think super underrated for guys who haven't had the chance to skate with ECHL players or watch a game firsthand. Like the talent is incredible. And it was pretty eye-opening and pretty awesome to be there on the bench and to be soaking it all in. And then I found out Saturday morning after my morning skate, I did a little morning skate. And then the coach was like, hey, you're going tonight. Like, you ready to play? And I was like, whoa, like, I didn't expect this just one day later. So I ended up getting that start Saturday night. So that was 2 weeks after my college season had ended. And it was pretty crazy. And it was a pretty exciting first night. I remember finding out. And so I called my goalie coach and I called some guys at Norwich, my family, saying, hey, like, I'm going to get to play here tonight. Pretty exciting. And I was actually starting head-to-head against my former Norwich teammate, Ty Reichenbach. And so we played together at Norwich for 3 full years. He was in the ECHL. He had a couple great years of pro hockey, and he even got to play in the AHL before he decided to hang him up. And so I got to start head-to-head against my old teammate and friend, Ty, which was awesome. It was St. Patrick's Day in 2018, so they had the neutral zone. They painted green. So it was like green ice. They had these nice St. Patrick's Day jerseys. There's probably 8,500 people, in the Norfolk Arena, which was super cool. And I was like, wow, this is it. Like, I got like the little New York Rangers patch on my shoulder here because, Greenville at the time was affiliated with the Rangers. And like, I couldn't believe after, my career of getting cut everywhere that I was able to play at this level. And, for some guys, it's like, oh, getting demoted to the ECHL. For me, it was like, that was my NHL. And then I remember we got into the game and it was about just over a minute in. And the first shot I faced, I got scored on. It was the play developed. It came up with the half wall and a guy went D to D. And it was like, I think the guy took a one-timer and it was like kind of like a double-layered screen. I started off looking through the right, trying to look through the short side, and I tried to look through the left. I couldn't quite pick it up, went far side. And I just remember like trying to like drop it and just like praying that it was going to hit me. And I remember it not hitting me. And then I remember it, like everyone going crazy. I was like, oh no, like this is awful. And so about a minute in, got scored on the first shot. It was about 8,500 people, probably all drunk already because it was St. Patrick's Day, having a great party. And I was like, man, this is not what I was hoping for my first night. But it ended up okay. We ended up losing 5-2. But I had 44 shots against, so I can live with it because I was peppered pretty good, and I felt like I made some good saves and played all right. So, yeah, that was my first experience. But it was kind of just a whirlwind. And then after that, I was there for a couple of weeks. After the end of my amateur trial, I think it was 10 days, they signed me to a full contract. They're like, yeah, we got 5 games left in the season. I think we were last place in the league at the time. They're like, yeah, you've worked hard. We'd like to keep you around, maybe get you a couple more games before the season ends. And so that was great. We went down on a Florida road trip. We were there for, I think, a 3-game road trip in Orlando and Florida. And then the New York Rangers assigned one of their goalies down. And so they're like, hey, I mean, this guy's coming down from Hartford in the A. Like, he's got to play. He's got to be here. I don't have a spot. Like, I'm sorry, but we got to release you. And I was like, I get it. Like, I know. So I got cut, and then I called around the SPHL. I had a few teams that contacted me before, and Jeff Bess, who was actually my coach my last year in Evansville as well, he was out in Pensacola at the time. And I reached out to him. He's like, yeah, we'd love to bring you in. And so I ended up coming in there for a day or for about a week, and I got to play another game, which I did get the win. That was my first pro win. It was 7-6, though. We were up 7-3 with about 3.5 minutes left. I gave up 3 goals in the last 3.5 minutes, so that was a bit of another disaster. So my SPHL numbers and my ECHL numbers, if you look at that 2017, 2018, are not too hot, but it was fun. And then they ended up having another goalie come back down from the ECHL that they had early in the year, so I got released there, which was fine. I understood. And at that point, I'd been suitcasing for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I had to go back to school. So I was like, you know what, I'll just go back, finish off the year, and figure out what I can do for next year. So that was kind of the whirlwind pro summer experience, but I was hooked, and I knew I had to play a couple more years. So it was fun.
Yeah, that it just seems like it seemed like it was a blast, even though you got the L in the ECHL, but like you still stood on your head facing 44 shots in your first pro game. So that must have been pretty incredible to see. And then like getting that first win in the SB, like that must have been a great feeling. So I want to end this episode with like a little like Learn to Perform podcast talks. Like what it's like you created like Learn to Perform. It's like what went behind the meaning of the podcast and like the name behind it.
Yeah, so it comes back to a lot of what we've talked about today. And when the pandemic started, I just started learning and absorbing everything. I was reading, PubMed, so research articles. I found that was fun. I was listening to a ton of podcasts and just learning about life and performance. And I've got super obsessed with human physiology and health. So everything from, we talk about nutrition to sleep, to exercise, and then little nuanced topics like fasting or cold therapy or breathing techniques, meditation, gratitude expression. And I just made a lot of changes to my life. And as I started learning about these things, I started applying them. And I found that my life was improving drastically. I felt way more energized. I felt way more productive. I felt happier. And it was crazy because after going through such a shift in my life and losing my hockey career and losing all this other stuff and having no idea what was next, I was surprised that I was like, this is the happiest I've ever been. Like, I feel amazing. Like, I just feel so much better. So I started telling a lot of friends and family about it, and they started incorporating techniques and doing things. And, I noticed them feeling better about their lives. And my best friend, Naba Lamy, basically, we were kind of talking in the summer. We talk all the time, and he's like, you should start a podcast and share this stuff. He's like, because, I've got all these people at work asking me like, hey, what are you doing, Naba? Like, you look great. Like, you feel great. Like, you've been losing all this weight. Like, what's going on? He's like, oh yeah, I just started doing X, Y, and Z. And yeah, my friend taught me. And then he kind of got the idea. He's like, I've had a lot of people where it's just like, where'd you learn this? And I was like, I don't know. My friend explained it to me. And he's like, well, could you explain it? And, sometimes we talk about the science of cold thermogenesis or, even sleep. And it's just, the science is so complicated. And as I found even reading is like, you have to go through like 2-hour long podcasts with like doctors, and you're reading I'm reading PubMed articles all the time, or you're reading books, and it's really, really complicated and convoluted. And sometimes I think there's this huge gap in information between, there's this information that exists, and then there's information that people actually know and can translate to the public. And so what I started doing is, because when I was telling friends and people, I kind of would take the information, I'd learn it, I'd study it, and I'd internalize it, and then try and explain it in a way that makes sense and is motivating and inspiring. And then I felt like there's kind of this gap between the super complex information and information that most people would be willing to listen to and absorb. And so he kind of got the idea, and he gave it to me. He's like, you should maybe start a podcast or start some way where you can condense information that's highly complex, break it down for people, and have just like easy, actionable recommendations. Okay, like, oh, you want to make your sleep better? This is a little bit of the science to try and help you understand what's going on. And these are just some practical steps you can take today or tomorrow, and to try and, slowly improve your life. Like we talked about that 1%. And that was kind of the idea. And I was just super into it. I was like, I'd love to be able to serve people. Going to Norwich University as a military university, I was super inspired to start finding my way to serve other people. I've got a lot of friends that commissioned into the Air Force, into, the Army and the Navy and the Marines, and just trying to think, okay, well, what's my role in serving other people in the world? And how can I do it, if I'm not going to be serving in the military? And this was kind of my way. I was like, what, these are my skills and my strengths and my interests. And if I can make information available that's going to help people improve their lives, or, improve their performance in an athletic setting, whatever that may be, I'd love to do that. I'm passionate about it. I'm going to be reading this stuff and learning it anyways. So it's not really extra work. It's stuff I love to do. And I just kind of got the idea. I thought, what, if I'm going to do this, let's try and do it right. So I wanted to build up a brand, and I had a ton of great people help me, so I've been putting together, got a website going and putting out podcasts and trying to reach out to as many channels as possible. And that's basically just the idea. Is it's all about learning and performing. And so that's kind of where the name came from, is, like we've talked about today, I just love learning about these different things. And then it's about performing and applying them. Right. So that's kind of the origins for the podcast. And hopefully I can help reach people and improve their lives in whatever aspect they may be. And, it's just a matter of making information accessible. It's not about telling people how to live their life or what to do, because at the end of the day, it's all personal choices, but it's just saying, let me just provide you with some tools, and it's up to you if you're interested in them or want to use them or not.
Yeah, that's unreal what you're doing, and just like everything you learned and giving back. It's like, when's the release date for the podcast?
Yeah, so I released the trailer. It's already up on Apple iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher, and I'm hopefully going to get it onto some more. And then it's on my website, which is learntoperform.com, and that's 2 is Roman numeral, so it's learniiperform.com. But I'm releasing the first 5 episodes on Tuesday, December 8th, and then I'll be doing 1 episode weekly after that. So every Tuesday there'll be extra episodes, and then you can find me on Instagram, and I got a Facebook page, which is, I think, Braeden Ostepchuk, Learn to Perform. And then my Instagram is just Braeden Ostepchuk, which is my name. And yeah, so I'm just gonna be posting content, little tidbits, kind of sharing as much information through different videos, through little quote pages. And then obviously through the episodes will be the most comprehensive information. And then on the website, I'll include the full transcript. So for every episode I do, and I'll have all the site sources and citations. So a lot of these episodes are 30, 40 citations. And so if you want to go through and do your own extra research and digging into or fact checking, it's all going to be there. So that's basically where you can find it. And it's coming out. Yeah, December 8th is when I'll start launching. So I'm pretty excited to start spreading the information, hopefully help people out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll definitely include all your links in the description of this episode, so to get you out there and get hopefully some of my viewers to go to your podcast as well. So, Braeden, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show and taking time out of your day to come on. I really appreciate your time. I want to wish you the best of luck going forward with the podcast and life as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack, for having me. I appreciate you reaching out and finding me and inviting me onto your platform. I know you've got a ton of great guests, and you've shared so much great information with people, and you're clearly passionate about this, and you're well prepared. So it's been my pleasure to talk about it, and I wish you all the best as well going forward. And if there's any time we can reconnect, just let me know. I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to get you on another episode as well in the future.
Yeah, we could definitely make that happen.
Oh yeah, definitely.